Pasok naman. Mouth crimping? Ano ba yun? Mouth crimping. 15 million tong nilagay namin eh. Mouth crimping machines for bullets.
Jingle ako.
Baka matanong tayo sa lang. Yeah. Thank you sa ano, sa relocation. Reacting yung mga money. Sorry, pero nga ng ballpen mo. Wala nang tinta to, hangin na. Yes, sir. Lagi ka may dagdag eh. Ano, Louie? Lagi may dagdag eh. Ngayon may dagdag na naman. Yes, sir. Yung ano, disaster in department. Ngayon, naka-incorporate ko yung budget ng Philippine Marines sa Navy. Kasi hindi pa naman, pinapropose pa lang natin ang installment na separate.
Nandun pa rin sila sa loob.
Yeah.
Kailangan identify na sila.
Magkano yun sa nagdagdag tayo ng 3.4 million. Pero magkano yung sa kanta doon? Nakakasama sa proposal natin to change the language. Sinama na, iniwalay na natin. Earmark lang.
Session is resumed. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move that we take up the budget of the Department of National Defense and recognize the sponsor, Senator Panfilo Ping Lacson.
Thank you. Mr.
All right,
President.
any objection? Hearing none, we are now considering the budget of the Department of National Defense. Senator Pampilo Lacson, sponsor, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. There are 11 offices or agencies attached to the Department of National Defense. And we are proposing new appropriations for the department and its attached agencies for fiscal year 2020, the amount of 191,340,253,000 pesos. This is 4% of GDP. In their key security strategy for 2018, it's stated that there should be a minimum of 2% of GDP appropriations for the Department of National Defense. The proposed new appropriations is distributed as follows. For the Office of the Secretary, 625,091,000 pesos. For the General Arsenal, 1,302,801,000 pesos. For the National Defense College of the Philippines, 118,804,000 pesos. For the Office of Civil Defense, 1,236,366,000 pesos. For the Philippine Veterans Affairs Office or PIVAO, 592,454,000 pesos. For the Veterans Memorial Medical Center, 1,754,818,000 pesos. For the Armed Forces of the Philippines, 185,709,919,000 pesos, broken down as follows. 92,413,006,000 pesos for the Philippine Army, 26,236,267,000 for the Philippine Air Force, 29,029,943,000 pesos for the Philippine Navy, and 38,030,703,000 for the General Headquarters, AFP, and AFP-wide service units. We're also proposing to amend the appropriations language to reflect the Philippine Marine Corps as a key budgeting unit. So right now, while their budget is still large with the Philippine Navy, it already specifies how much is earmarked for the Philippine Marine Corps. So with that, the sponsor is now ready for interpellations, Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Our dear colleagues, all three on the floor who are planning to interpolate, are asking for a few minutes to just read their the information and questions that they're preparing for the DND. If it's all right, we suspend for a few minutes, Mr. President.
Yes, of course. Session is suspended.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Si
Session is resumed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, first to interpolate the gentleman from Cavite, is also a gentleman from Cavite, Mr. President,
Nagtutok na kayo
Senator
ni Kuy?
Francis Tolentino. May we recognize Senator Francis Tolentino, Mr. President.
Senator Francis Tolentino, gentleman from Cavite, is recognized.
Silbihan ko siya.
Morning, Mr. President. Good morning,
Bilang mo na lang sa office mo, baka doon magpunta.
Mr. Chair. Alam niyo po, wala sana akong itatanong. I'm here to support the budget of the Department of National Defense.
Thank you, Your Honor.
But I was egged on by our majority floor leader to ask some questions. So, with due respect to my friend, former colleague in the cabinet, Secretary Lorenzana, let me propound some general questions which can be readily answered by the good chair. It was mentioned a while ago that our budget for 2020, if I'm not mistaken, is 4% or 2% of the GDP, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Chair.
As per their national security strategy of 2018, there should be a minimum of 2% of GDP. But now, as it is, as recommended by the Senate under its committee report, nasa 4% tayo.
And the doubling of the budget, Mr. President, would be equated to the massive capital investments being done right now by the armed forces of the Philippines, especially the Philippine Navy. And this is probably of historic proportions because we have been reading in news reports left and right that several ships are arriving within this year at first quarter of next year. Am I correct, Mr. President?
That is correct, although it is being carried under the unprogrammed appropriations. Yung sa modernization, there's 5 billion actually. But the bulk of the budget of the DND and the attached agencies would go to PS, 63%, di ba? Mga nasa 63% yung PS because they have been recruiting personnel to address the need of security.
And the security requirement, Mr. President, is really relevant considering present conditions, considering perhaps the latest news report emanating from Samar yesterday that we lost 3 personnel of the
6.
Philippine Army in an encounter with some...
6 Army personnel and wounding of 20 others.
Yes, Mr. President. But if I may glance and quote a study done by the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute for 2018, the budget of the Philippines for defense was just ranked number 5 in terms of vis-a-vis our ASEAN friendly neighbors. And if I may be allowed to quote, Mr. President, the defense budget of Singapore for 2018, and this probably is the latest configuration coming from the said institute, is more than $10 billion, if I'm not mistaken by the number of zeros here, even with my reading glass. Indonesia comes in second with more than 7 billion. Thailand is third, more than 6. Vietnam is fourth, and the Philippines is number 5, followed by Malaysia, Mr. President. Dito po ba sa ranking na ito sa dumaang 2 taon, 2019, and with the proposed budget for 2020, tama pa ba ho ito na panglima lang po tayo sa ranking, sa pecking order in terms of defense budget sa ating mga kasamahan sa Association of Southeast Asian Nations, Mr.
Palagay ko
President?
po, hindi po tama yan. Hindi, walang hustisya para sa ating armed forces, para sa ating defense establishment, considering the obtaining situation, particularly sa West Philippine Sea. Meron pa tayong internal conflict dito. They're still facing the problem of terrorism in the south or anywhere else in the country. So mukhang argabyado po talaga kung number 5 lang tayo sa ASEAN.
Mr. Chair, wala po tayong datos dito po ngayon sa panukalang gastusin para sa 2020 kung magiging pang-ilan ang ranking ng ating bansa in terms of defense expenditures, Mr. President.
Kasi po wala naman tayong datos ng ibang bansa na pagkukumparahan natin. So mahirap sabihin na lalaktaw tayo ng number 4, number 3, o bababa tayo number 6. Kailangan makuha natin yung datos para naman sa kanilang 2020 budget para natin madetermina kung magiging pang ilan tayo dito sa ating pinopropose na 191 billion pesos para sa ating defense establishment.
But my good kababayan from Cavite acknowledged a while ago that nadoble na po ito, and then if we really have to produce a graph relative to the previous budgets, ito na po siguro yung pinakamalaking budget na tinanggap ng Department of National Defense ng Sandatahang Lakas ng Pilipinas simula sa ilang dekada pa ang nakakaraan. Am I correct, Mr. President?
Yeah, tama po. Katunayan po noong nagkaroon tayo ng pagdinig at nandun din po kayo, tinanong natin din yan kay Secretary Lorenzana at ito po yung kanyang isinagot. Sabi niya, we have to catch up, sir. We should not revise the goal but we should catch up with our capital asset procurement or on our capital asset procurement. We're still in the horizon 2, Mr. Chair. It's up to the end of 2022. And maybe after that, then we can say we have achieved maybe 80% of our target of being a credible or having a credible defense posture. So yun po yung hope ng good Secretary of National Defense na sana bago matapos yung 2022, makahabol man lang tayo sa ating mga kapitbahay.
And we totally agree, Mr. President, that there should be a catch-up plan if this Stockholm International Peace Research Institute study is correct relative to defense expenditure. Hindi lang po siguro 4% or 2% ng GDP. Baka kaya pa nating mapataas ng 6%. But if I recall, Mr. President, studies were made, and I'm not prepared to give out the exact figures, that insofar as defense spending, the People's Republic of China has the highest defense outlay relative to the other big powers, even surpassing the United States, Mr. President, and Russia. May we know from the good chair if this is a correct conclusion, and if we have a figure vis-a-vis the defense spending of the People's Republic of China as against the current proposed outlay for the Department of National Defense. Ganong kaliit po tayo kung ikukumpara sa gastusin ng People's Republic of China.
I could not agree more, Mr. Or distinguished colleague, na talagang wala naman tayong basihan para i-compare man lang yung ating sarili sa People's Republic of China o kanilang PLA, ano? Talaga napakalayo po. At yan pa yung hinaharap nating problema, lalo na sa usaping West Philippine Sea. So yung catch-up plan, I had a private discussion with the Secretary Lorenzana. Maybe we can now revisit the revised AFP modernization plan para magkaroon tayo ng konting adjustments. Dahil while we passed this, how many years ago? Kailan yung revised yung 104, ano yung Republic Act, revised modernization. Anyway, napag-usapan po namin ito at pag-aaralan nila kung po pwedeng magpasa ulit tayo ng batas para bisitahin uli yung revised AFP modernization plan.
Tama po, Mr. President, pero sa People's Republic of China, yung latest figures na hawak-hawak ko, 177.49 billion US dollars ang kanilang budget. Kung pagsamasamahin pa ho itong budget ng buong ASEAN, malaki pa ho itong sa People's Republic of China. Hindi pa siguro tinatalakay dito yung mga nanggagaling doon sa mga naval militia nila na hindi natin malaman kung ito pa ay gastusing sibilyan, yung mga nanggagaling sa Guangzhou, o gastusing pang-militar. So,
177. 177. So roughly, parang 50 times kung ang currency exchange rate ng peso sa dollar ay 50 pesos, nasa more or less, nasa 40 times siguro yung kanilang lakas kesa sa ating tanggulang pambansa.
So, lumalabas po dyan, Mr. President, na talagang prioridad ng People's Republic of China ang gastusing para sa kanilang defense. At if I may quote some items here in my presence, which is related to the parliamentary discussion we have right now, Mr. Chair, noon pong as early as 2013, June 27 to be exact, Admiral Liu Huaqing, the mastermind of China's modern naval strategy, said in 1982 that they would control the first and second island chains by 2010 and 2020 respectively. And the first island chain would refer to the Kuril Islands to Borneo and the northern part of the Philippines, taking over the whole Spratly Islands and Taiwan. And the second island chain, if I may quote, would refer to the east of Luzon, which includes the Benham Rice, Ogasawara Islands and the Volcano Islands of Japan, to the Mariana Islands and Guam. Medyo nadidelay po ito kasi malapit na yung 2020. Why am I saying this, Mr. President? I filed 2 weeks ago a bill that would establish a naval chain, a naval chain that would protect the main archipelago of the Philippines. And I'm looking at I have a glance at the budget of the Armed Forces of the Philippines and the Department of National Defense. Even if the good secretary acknowledged during the committee hearing that the new policy is to have small forward operating bases, apparently it is not reflected in the 2020 budget, Mr. President. So, paano po ito, Mr. Chair? Sinabi po ng kagalang-galang na kalihim ng DND na ito po ay polisiya na. If I may, since this has been out in the press several months ago, we have an island in Batanes, which is now being manned by our Philippine Marines, a detachment or bigger than that, Mabulis, if that's the correct term. We have a small island in Tawi-Tawi, I forgot the name, which was recently being...
Pangwal daw,
Yes, Mr. President.
Your Honor.
So, ang nakita ko po doon sa... Napakaganda po itong strategiya, although this should not be in the open, but for purposes of budgetary planning, hindi ko po nakita, Mr. Chair, na nakasama doon sa budgetary requirements ng Department of National Defense.
Siguro pag nagkaroon ulit ng budget call para sa 2021, kasi hindi na isama ito sa National Expenditure Program, although agree naman sila doon sa mungkahi ninyo na dapat talaga magkaroon ng mga small unit forward bases, especially doon sa, sinabi nyo nga, doon sa may Batanes, ang sabi nila, Mabulis Island, at saka sa Tawi-Tawi yung pangwal. So, probably, pagdating ng Marso sa isang taon at nagkaroon ng budget call, seriously, they will consider asking for the appropriations or budget to put up the facilities that you are talking about now, Your Honor.
Kaya ko po yun nabanggit, Mr. President, Mr. Chair, is that several months ago, two naval ships of the People's Republic of China happened to pass by the area unannounced, undetected after a few days, near the Tawi-Tawi Island that is now being manned by a Philippine Marines detachment. Kaya ko po sinasabi to, Mr. President, kung hintayin pa natin yung 2020 budget call, baka maraming dumaan na naman uli na mga barkong pandigma ang ilang bansa na hindi natin na detect, at baka paano mamimaintain itong dalawang islands na pinapatakbo na ngayon ng Philippine Navy, ng Philippine Marines, kung wala pong budgetary support ngayong 2020, Mr. President?
Well, we'll try to scout for some amount from other agencies, and let's see if we can realign whatever necessary appropriations is needed to man those two islands that you just mentioned, Your Honor.
Your Honor, I
Maybe
think...
you can help me look for some amount to be, taken out from some agencies that would not be needing those appropriations.
Mr. President, I think the good chair is more astute, more deliberate, and more intricate in finding budgetary sources lodged in other departments that are currently unutilized. Malaki po maitutulong ni Senator Lacson, pero hindi lamang po yun, Mr. President. I have heard from my sources that the Philippine Navy, which I'd like to commend, is also scouting the possibility of having a similar naval base somewhere in Aurora, and another one somewhere in Pulillo Island, as confirmed personally by Secretary Lorenzana, which would include an airstrip, and that would include perhaps some Philippine Air Force personnel. So, napakagaganda po nitong mga planong ito na kung talagang hahanapan natin ng pondo, ay talagang dapat po mabigyan hand in hand with the current capital investment plan of the Department of National Defense, Mr. President. So hindi lang po dalawa, baka apat pa o anim po ito, Mr. Chair, Mr. President.
Even as you speak, we're already discussing how much would it take to put up a small detachment. I mean, the facility that would be needed, say, in the island of Batanes province, and that one in Tawi-Tawi. So we will seriously consider, and we would like to thank the distinguished gentleman from Cavite for putting forward your thoughts on this matter.
Yes, Mr. President. At sa palagay ko naman po, hindi talaga magiging malaki ang pangangailangan dito. Ang nakikita ko lamang po, aside from the construction of some housing facilities and perhaps the barracks, an armory, ang pinakamalaking capital expenditure po dito ay yung mga kakailanganing desalination machines, dahil wala pong tubig na may inom yung ating kasundaluhan. Yun po yung nararanasan nila sa Tawi-Tawi. Having said that, Mr. President, and I think the good chair is one with this representation in really augmenting the capability of the armed forces, most especially the Philippine Navy. Hindi po ako Navy, ako po ay Army. Binabati ko po ang ating chairman sa masusing pagbalangkas ng budget para po sa 2020. Other matters perhaps should not be discussed in the plenary, and I probably would refer to possible ISIS incursions in the south, given that there are confirmed personalities in the area. But I'd like to congratulate the defense establishment. The goal really, Mr. President, is to have a credible defense posture, not by year 2030, Mr. President, but within 2 to 3 years. Kailangan po talagang lumakas ang ating sandatahang lakas. Kailangan pong igalang ang ating sandatahang lakas, at kailangan din sigurong kilalanin ng ibang bansa na meron tayong credible defense posture. With that, Mr. President, I end my brief interpellation as per request of the majority floor leader, and I totally support the budget of the Department of National Defense. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. As a matter of fact, even as you were speaking, they already have an estimate, 20 million for putting for putting up the facilities, and then to maintain, sabi nila, probably mga 50 million a year. So pinag-aralan na nila, and they will try to look for some funds sa ilalim ng kanilang MOE kung po pwedeng isakatuparan na yung inyong napakagandang mungkahi. At nagpapasalamat sila through me sa inyo sa inyong napakagandang idea. Tama po kayo, hindi na kailangang paghintayin pa yung mga problemang pwedeng mangyari diyan, maganap, na baka may incursions na namang mangyari, mawala yung ating mga isla off Batanes and off Tawi-Tawi. So, with that, thank you very much, distinguished gentleman from Cavite.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you very much to our chair, Senator Lacson.
Senator Francis Pangilinan is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. May we know if the good sponsor is willing to yield to a few questions?
Willingly to my batchmate since 2001, batchmate dito sa Senate.
To my Mista.
True and true.
My Senate Mista. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you, distinguished sponsor. At the onset, Mr. President, distinguished sponsor, I would like to state for the record that we support the budget of the Armed Forces of the Philippines and the Department of National Defense. We are not objecting to its swift passage. But having said that, we have some questions that we would like to raise so that we can be clarified as to some of the concerns involving the Armed Forces of the Philippines, as well as the Department of National Defense. Mr. President, distinguished sponsor, during the Finance Committee's subcommittee hearing last September 30, this representation raised some inquiries regarding the memorandum of agreement between the Armed Forces of the Philippines and the Dito Telecommunity telco company. We'd like to thank Senator Lacson as well as Secretary Lorenzana, because during that hearing we had requested, I think it was first requested by the minority leader and was reiterated by this representation, that we had requested that we be provided a copy of the memorandum of agreement between the AFP and Dito, and we were in fact provided a copy, and we'd
Including
like,
the risk analysis.
yes, together with the risk analysis, which we had likewise requested, and we had the opportunity to review it, and we had the opportunity to go through the risk analysis, and without divulging confidential information, we'd like to raise some clarificatory questions so that we are all entering into whatever arrangement with our eyes wide open, ika nga. Distinguished sponsor, my first question would be, is the AFP and the DND familiar with the intelligence alliance called Five Eyes?
Yeah, they're familiar with the Five Eyes, Mr. President.
Yes. Just for the record, the Five Eyes is an intelligence alliance among the following countries: Australia, Canada, New Zealand, the United Kingdom, and the United States.
Yes, that is correct, Mr. President.
These countries are parties to a treaty for joint cooperation in signals intelligence, intelligence gathering by interception of signals, whether communications between people or from electronic signals, not directly used in communications. I raise this question because, Mr. President, the US, Australia, and New Zealand have banned the use of the Chinese company's Huawei technology in their fifth generation or 5G networks over national security concerns. The Huawei is a multinational corporation based in Shenzhen. The United Kingdom, on the other hand, limited Huawei to contribute to non-core 5G infrastructure, such as antennas. Canada, on the other hand, postponed its decision to ban or limit Huawei operations until after its federal elections. Mr. President, while Huawei is not involved directly in this memorandum of agreement, China Telco is somehow involved because it is the China Telco that is in partnership with DITO. China Telco, unlike Huawei, is a state-owned company. We are concerned about precisely the involvement of China Telco. Although there has been a risk analysis undertaken by the AFP, and we've gone through that, we would just like, for the record, to get the sense of the Armed Forces of the Philippines through the Secretary of National Defense about this concern of these other countries towards Huawei, and if there's any reason to be concerned about China Telco, on the other hand, being involved in building of telecommunication facilities within military camps. Just for the record, Mr. President.
I'm in conversation with the Secretary of National Defense, and he has not finally decided on the concerns that you raised during the subcommittee hearing, and they're awaiting the feedback from you, from Senator Drilon, and whoever else raised those concerns. As regards Huawei, lest we forget, Huawei is in partnership with the duopoly,
That is
Globe
correct.
and Smart. So doon sila kumukuha ng mga pieces of equipment, because they're in partnership. So if we raise the question, or if we raise our concern, doon sa yung mga security concern natin, doon sa Ms. Latel, in partnership with China Tel ba yan? China Telco.
China Telco.
Well, yes, there could be valid concerns, but they need the input from you.
Yes.
Kung meron kayong knowledge about security matters that could compromise, so you may just submit directly to the office of the secretary or to the secretary himself, even after or during this plenary debates, and they will seriously consider and even appreciate having your inputs para so he can decide what to do.
We'd like to thank the good sponsor and, of course, the Secretary for this opportunity for us to be able to provide additional inputs. And mahalaga po ito dahil we are all concerned, obviously, about
We should all be concerned, Mr. President.
possible breach of national security, and the DND should be in the forefront, and the AFP in terms of protecting our national security. Just for the record, Mr. President, and I'd like this placed so that our colleagues are also clarified about the matter. Apart from the Five Eyes, Huawei phones were also banned by networks in the US, including Verizon and AT&T, after being labeled as a security threat. Langley Intelligence Group Network, or LIGNET, which is a US-based service providing global intelligence and forecasting from former CIA, US intelligence, and national security officers, raised concerns about electronic backdoor in Huawei and ZTE telecoms components. I understand, yes, that Globe and Smart also have Huawei technology, but these concerns that have been raised by Five Eyes and that I've quoted were fairly recent, just in the last, in fact, within the year, this 2018. One article is dated February 2019, so this was just a few months ago. So it would do well for us to be updated and to look into these concerns as moving forward. According to LIGNET, if I may quote, these companies, Huawei and ZTE, can remotely access communications technologies that could disable a country's telecommunications infrastructure before a military engagement. or steal, quote unquote, technology and trade secrets. So if Huawei is viewed as such by Verizon and AT&T and a US-based information intelligence network, this should at least give us some pause in terms of evaluating our security considerations as well as the MOA. I would like to stress that I'm not objecting to entering into a MOA. I would just like to make sure and that entering into this memorandum of agreement, we do have clear-cut safeguards to be able to protect our national interest and national security. Mr. President, distinguished speaker, sponsor rather, another question I'd like to raise is on the matter of the counter-espionage law of 2014 of the People's Republic of China. Is the Armed Forces of the Philippines and the Secretary of National Defense familiar with these two laws? Or at least, do they have a sense? Number one is the counter-espionage law of 2014, and the other is the Chinese National Intelligence Law of 2017.
This about private companies in China that are involved in spying. No?
Yes, that is correct. That is, if I may place this on record, Mr. President, the Chinese government under
Basically, I think the Chinese government is requiring these private companies to spy for them. Not
Yes.
necessarily spy, but report to them.
Yes, the CNIL, or the Chinese National Intelligence Law of 2017, provides, and I quote, "It gives authorities sweeping powers to monitor and investigate foreign and domestic individuals and institutions," and, quote unquote, "allows Chinese intelligence agencies to search premises, seize property, and mobilize individuals or organizations to carry out espionage." We are placing this on record because precisely China Telco is a state-owned company, and the law says that authorities can mobilize individuals or organizations to carry out espionage. That
We-
being the case,
Yeah,
therefore,
we see your point very clearly, Mr. President.
yes, and that is why there is really a need to ensure that we have the highest safeguards in place or highest measures of security in place with respect to this particular memorandum of agreement. Apart from the CNIL of 2017 is the Counter-Espionage Law of 2014, or CEL. Before that, there is another provision of the CNIL, Article 7, which, quote unquote, requires any organization or citizen to support, assist, and cooperate with state intelligence work. In addition, Article 14, for the record, of the CNIL authorizes the state intelligence work organization to, quote, require relevant organs, organizations, and citizens to provide necessary support, assistance, and cooperation. So that is just amplifying the concern about a organization like China Telco being mandated by the state, by the authorities to carry out espionage or provide support, assistance, and cooperation. The other law, Mr. President, and for the record, CEL, that is the Counter-Espionage Law of 2014. Article 22, for the record, of CEL states, when state security organs investigate to learn of espionage conduct or gather relevant evidence, relevant organizations and individuals shall truthfully provide and must not refuse. So this, again, is a concern because if China Telco, a state-owned telecommunications company, is mandated theoretically by the state security organs to investigate, they shall truthfully provide information and must not refuse. So this has to be taken also into consideration, Mr. President.
As a matter of fact, they're taking notes, Mr. President.
Thank you. I'd like to think the length and breadth of experience of Secretary Lorenzana and his long stint in Washington, D.C. would provide him also access to contacts there who would be able to provide more information. He is more connected there than I am, for certain, and therefore that would also help us. Again, I do not wish to, I'm not placing any objection to the MOA. I am just raising these concerns because I'd like the Armed Forces of the Philippines and the Department of National Defense to consider this serious concerns as it puts together the agreement. Mr. President, the other concern that we've raised is, may we have just a minute suspension, Mr. President? Just a minute suspension. I just-
Session suspended.
Thank you. We are ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session resumed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Earlier, it was already manifested by the good sponsor that as of today, they have yet to act. The AFP and the Secretary, actually the Secretary has yet to act on the MOA. So I take that to mean that this has yet to be approved.
That is correct, because they're waiting for your input, Mr.
Yes.
President. That's how deferring they are to your honor, or to the Senate.
To the
as a
Senate,
body, yeah.
yes, and I'm sure, and I'm very thankful for this, and we appreciate this. And we'd like to just ensure that our concerns in terms of national security is addressed. So, Mr. President, based on the manifestation earlier, we would like to just inquire if the MOA has been reviewed by IT experts commissioned by the Armed Forces of the Philippines.
Yes, that's confirmed, Mr. President.
I understand that historically, the reason why these towers were installed within military camps was because, one, we do need strong telecommunications systems in the country. We do need better services from our telcos, considering ours is the slowest telco bandwidth service in the region, one of the slowest. And they did consider that at one point, these towers by Globe and Smart were being attacked or were being bombed, and therefore, considering the necessity precisely of telco services, it was the policy then to precisely bring them within military camps to be able to ensure the continuous service of these telcos in these areas. And therefore, that would be the advantage. We noticed that part of the MOA has stressed precisely that the call locator may not use classified information. This is not in the Smart and Globe agreement, and therefore, I guess this is, I would assume that this is a tacit recognition of the need to ensure that our security concerns are addressed. Is that not right? Is that not right? That particular provision precisely is to address the concerns of potential breach of security.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes. In the risk analysis, Mr. President, distinguished speaker, was there any simulation of possible towers being used for espionage? towers being sources of breach of security?
So far, none, Mr. President, for the simple reason na hindi pa naman sila naka-install dyan, wala pa na itatayo.
And we're also concerned about personal information of our kababayans. Again, this is a telco, this is information communication technology. We do hope that before the approval is made, that there are serious assessments regarding how to ensure that personal information of those using these telcos will be protected and that there will be no breach.
That will be included in their considerations, Mr. President.
Do we have Chinese reading or Chinese writing or Chinese language proficient military or national defense and security personnel?
I guess so, Mr. President. And they just confirmed that they have personnel that are fluent and competent enough to understand even Chinese character. Meron daw eh. Next year pa. meron daw.
Yes, that is good because we would like to ensure that we understand completely, the possible.
Without relying on interpreters.
Without relying on interpreters provided by them. So that they do not run circles around us. Similarly, do we have IT experts who will also be proficient in the language?
Yeah, they have, Mr. President.
Because we have to know the computer language used by foreign nationals so that we can actually monitor whether or not through the computer language that they utilize or they use, that we are completely in understanding of precisely what is going on. So therefore, the answer there is that we are capable of being able to monitor this.
That is correct, Your Honor.
The MOA states that it shall remain in force subject to termination by either or both parties. This is different from GLOBE, 1 year renewable, and SMART, 5 years renewable. Therefore, both SMART and GLOBE have specific periods of validity. Is there a reason why this is open-ended? Again, is this part of our ensuring that at any given point, if we feel that our national security is compromised, that we can terminate the said contract?
One reason why there's a discrepancy in the wordings of the MOA and the purpose, the intent of the MOA is because 1991 pa nandun yung Globe and Smart. And ito, pinag-aaral nila, and they have taken the necessary precautionary measures in the aspect of security. Kaya nilagyan nila ng clause na either party could terminate.
Yes, yes.
And that, I think, is the ideal language of the MOA.
In other words, this is a better,
This is a better MOA.
an improved MOA with this particular
Because
provision.
once they see some infractions, they can unilaterally terminate the agreement.
Yes, yes, thank you. Thank you for that clarification. I'm not sure if we can answer this publicly or that this be in executive session, but the AFP Dito Telecommunity MOA requires the host AFP to provide and make available such facilities in accordance with existing security regulations and maintain these facilities in operating conditions during this lease period. Well, just to clarify, in other words, we do have existing security regulations that we are to comply with. And that
Yes, definitely.
and it should be consistent with our security regulations.
Mas kinumpahan na namin, meron na yan, Mr. President.
Yes. And these security regulations would be, if breached, would be precisely one of the reasons or basis for a termination.
Unilateral termination.
Yes, a unilateral termination. The concern perhaps is that if the security regulations have been vetted independently, meaning we have taken,
They continuously improve on that regulations, that particular document, Mr. President.
yes,
I,
yes.
I would assume that because they have to adjust to the times, yung the demands of the times.
Yes, Mr. President, the risk analysis states that the AFP fixed communication system, which links together with the military camps and bases nationwide, is susceptible to electronic eavesdropping and interception. The risk analysis further mentions that the equipment to intercept signals are readily and cheaply available. In other words, you can really intercept. And to mitigate the risk, it says that the AFP will adopt physical access security and network security measures. In other words, we recognize there is that risk, but we also are putting in place security and network measures to ensure that these risks are mitigated. Is that right?
That is correct, Your Honor.
Would additional technology or equipment be perhaps, moving forward, will it be required? As we know, technology changes very quickly.
Kasama raw po sa kanilang yung sa security ng communications.
Yes, part of the MO also says that payment of rental may be by way of equipment provided by dito. Is that
Or
right?
services.
Or services, equipment or services. I'd like to think that even these equipment, the equipment will be subjected to.
It goes without saying, Mr. President.
I raise all these questions, distinguished sponsor, because precisely we would like to move or enter into any agreement with any country. It's not just China. Could be the United States as well. They too have espionage technology that we should guard against if we are to promote or uphold our security, our national security concerns. And having said that, Mr. President, perhaps we can follow through on this in terms of we don't wish to delay. We understand that a third telco is important, is critical for the service of for better services of our telco industry. But we would just like to enter this with our eyes wide open. And I have full trust and confidence in the capacity of our Secretary of National Defense to ensure this. We have no further questions, Mr. President, and we would like to thank the good sponsor, the Secretary, and the Chief of Staff for their time answering some of the difficult and sensitive questions that we have raised regarding this matter. Maraming salamat.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Recto.
Yeah. Wala naman safe eh. Basta gumamit yan. Thank you.
Senator Ralph Recto.
Thank you, Mr. President. This will be very brief. Would the sponsor of the measure or the budget of the DND yield to just a few questions?
Thank you to my Lodi in many aspects.
Same here. Same here, Mr. President. In fact, we have the same perfume, Mr. President. One of the things I learned from Senator Lacson. But having said that, Mr. President, I'd just like to put in perspective the budget of the DND with regard to our ASEAN neighbors and security, as articulated earlier as well by the gentleman from Cavite, Batangas, and then the entire country. Mr. President, isn't it true that one's defense is dependent on the size of the economy and of the population?
That is correct. That's why there's some kind of a measure, a yardstick. Ang sinusunod po natin, minimum of 2% of GDP.
That is
Yun
correct.
ang ating ibabudget sa defense establishment.
Correct, that's correct, Mr. President. In fact, yun ang panawagan ni Trump sa NATO allies to spend at least 2% because some of them are spending less than that of GDP. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And the U.S. spends roughly 3% of GDP for their armed forces, which is roughly $600 billion.
That is correct.
If
Mr.
China
President.
spends 170 billion, the U.S. outspends them 3 to 1. And that's why they have the biggest navy in the world.
The man from Washington is in agreement.
And that's why we use the US dollar as well in global trade.
Yeah.
Okay, having said that, Mr. President, may I know what is the defense spending of the entire ASEAN region, who should be our partners in the region, not only in trade, but also supposedly for defense?
What is the
The
spending?
Yeah, the total
It was
spending.
articulated by the distinguished gentleman from Cavite that we are ranked number 5 among the ASEAN countries.
Yes.
And he made a comparison with Singapore, Indonesia,
Yes.
and so forth and so
Yeah.
on. And Malaysia is next to us, no,
Yes.
number 6.
Yeah, the point I was driving at, Mr. President, is that if you add the budget of all the ASEAN countries for their defense,
Nagbago na pala, Mr. President. Number 6 na tayo.
yes,
Malaysia overtook us. This is as of this 2019, ano? So, yeah, 2019. We're ranked number 6.
yes. If we were to add the budget of all the ASEAN countries for their defense, for our defense in the region, and you include Australia, Japan, and Korea, wouldn't that be more or less equivalent to the China spending for defense?
Baka hindi pa tayo aabot, Mr. President.
Konting diferensya na lang.
Possible. So your point
Konting
is
diferensya
let's
lang.
band together with our ASEAN neighbors,
That is the point,
including
Mr.
Japan
President.
and
Korea, the ASEAN,
Yeah.
and Australia.
that's a very good
In fact, I will not
Suggestion,
stop
Mr.
to that. You know, the problem also, assuming that there was a problem with China, they are also landlocked, isn't that so?
that is correct, Mr.
And they have
President.
21 other countries landlocked with them. And
Coming-
India is one of the biggest.
Coming from
countries.
you, hindi na po ako nagtataka. Dahil yung mga ideas nyo talagang...
Now, having said that, Mr. President, you mentioned earlier, which is correct, that defense spending should be 2% of GDP.
Minimum of 2%.
Minimum. And I was surprised to look at the budget of the DND, and it would appear to me that the budget is 4.6% of
4.6.
the budget, but only 1% of GDP. Because our GDP today is 20 trillion pesos.
I stand corrected. No, I was referring to 4.6% of the budget,
correct.
of the 4.1 trillion budget.
Correct,
I
correct.
stand corrected, Mr.
Of
President.
the 4.3 trillion budget, actually.
Yes, that is
Tama mo yan,
correct.
program, yes. Okay.
Tama po.
Now, having said that, we're spending roughly, hindi ko na linagay yung pension ng retirees. Kasi hindi current spending yun sa armed forces eh. We're spending roughly 190 billion. Lagyan na natin ng 200 billion. Di ba? Mga 200 billion. Ang ekonomiya natin, 20 trillion. Ibig sabihin, 1% lang. So we should be spending double that.
According to them, it's 1.2 of GDP. 1.2% of
1.2
GDP.
if you were to include the pension.
So we're still short
Pero
of
hindi
the 2%.
naman dapat binibilang yung pension eh. Pensionado na yun eh.
Kasama pa raw po yung pension doon sa 1.2 of GDP.
Correct. That's my point. So kung tanggalin mo yung pension, 1% lang.
That's actually a pittance, Mr.
Yes,
President.
that's the point. No? Now, alam ko naman mahal itong AFP modernization. And we have spent roughly, what, 150 billion already? More or less, capital outlay for AFP modernization over the years. Is that correct? More or less, no?
So far, magkano yung
Mga
sa
150 billion
modernization?
tayo.
75? Yung sa modernization so far. Magkano na tayo?
131? Yeah, okay. Yes. And the reason why I asked that number is that I wanted to also make a manifestation here that, and to get the thoughts of the Secretary, of that 130 or 150 billion that we spent for AFP.
So far, we have spent 197 billion pesos.
200 billion, yes.
Yeah.
200 billion.
RA 7898, saka yung 10349, yung revised.
So I would assume there would be naval assets,
Air
Army
assets.
air assets, no? Okay. And having said that, of this 200 billion, meron ba tayong to a certain degree na local content requirement? Yung made in the Philippines.
Meron po yung ating government arsenal, maski pa paano.
Yes, I'll get to that
nakapag-produce
later
sila.
on.
Yes.
Pero eto sa capital build-up natin.
Well, the
Meron
problem is, Mr. President, is in the policy, the national government policy. We took a look at the R&D appropriations. Alam niyo po, number 54 tayo sa global index. No? Ang ating spending sa R&D ay pitiful 3.9%. So, paano tayo mag-advance in this department
Yeah.
kung ang nilalagak na pondo ng gobyerno
Yes,
for
I understand.
R&D
Yeah.
is only 3.9% of the entire budget?
Yes, I understand that. No, I'll give you one example. And I think we discussed this previously, maybe in last year's budget also. Halimbawa, Navy. The Philippines today is the fourth biggest shipbuilder in the world.
That is correct.
So yung non-technical aspects of shipbuilding, halimbawa yung radar, wala tayo niyan. Import natin yan. Pero halimbawa yung naval ship, gumagawa na tayo sa Cebu niyan, yung Tunishi. 4,000, 5,000 vehicle carrier.
And we missed the opportunities sa Subic, yung Hanjin.
Hanjin. Oh.
We could have taken it
Yes.
over
Yes.
and operate it ourselves
That's
para sa
correct.
shipbuilding natin, or at least sa dry docking man lang.
That's correct. So, yun halimbawa, we could be building our own Navy, our own Coast Guard. And for example, why not partner with the countries I mentioned earlier, especially the United States and some other European allies, with regard to producing Navy ships in the Philippines using Philippine workers? Or, halimbawa, aren't we purchasing a Black Hawk from Poland?
Ilan? We're purchasing 16 of
Black
those.
Hawks.
Yes, Black Hawk.
Okay, made in Poland.
Yes, that is correct.
American technology made in Poland.
American company based in Poland.
Yes. So we have a mutual defense treaty with the U.S.
Yes,
That is operational.
it's still existing.
So why can't we make Black Hawks in the Philippines? I mean, it's a way of thinking, Mr.
Very,
President.
very good question, Mr. President.
Yes. And the point is, as we began discussing that our defense is dependent on the size of your population and the size of your economy. If we could have certain local content requirement made in the Philippines, more jobs will be created, then our economy becomes just bigger and bigger. And we will have the sustainability for spending more on our military. Di ba?
And we'll be spending less because we are producing our own equipment.
Correct. It will cost us less. No? So more buck for your, more money for your, more bang for the buck, so to speak. No? Now, there is a, yes, Mr. President. Yes.
I asked this during the committee deliberation, and I agree with Senator Recto that we should have more local content. The committee then took cognizance of existing projects of the OST, Diwata 1 and Diwata 2, launched by the University of the Philippines in 2016 and 2018. These are satellites passing by the Philippines every 24 hours, microsatellites about 50 kilograms in weight, with low Earth orbit in at 400 to 420 kilometers from the ground. What I'm saying, Mr. President, is that I agree with Senator Recto that we should utilize local content. And we have satellites passing by the West Philippine Sea every 24 hours, Mr. President. And this could be utilized by the Department of National Defense without additional cost. It's probably just a matter of tying up with the Department of Science and Technology and perhaps activating their own cyber warfare command if we have one. So that is a point I'd like to interject, Mr. President. Thank you.
Point well taken. Thank you very much for that intervention. Last two items, Mr. President. We do have a government arsenal,
We have.
which you mentioned earlier.
Yes, Mr. President.
And what is the mandate of the government arsenal?
Basically, they're manufacturing the ammunition requirement of the AFP, the small arms, Mr. President.
But isn't that part of this mandate also? Teka. 1 minute suspension, Mr. President.
Session suspended.
Ready, Mr. President.
Session resumed.
Thank you. Isn't it that part of their mandate is to formulate plans and programs to achieve self-sufficiency? Self-sufficiency in small arms, mortar, and other weapons and munitions.
Yes, that's number 2 on their mandate, list of mandate, Mr.
Yes.
President.
So, napakahalaga nito. Now, ito simple lang. We were talking about the Navy earlier, Black Hawk. Nung araw, gumagawa na tayo ng mga M16 dito. In the 70s, during the time of President Marcos. Elisco. Elizalde Tool Company. Natatandaan ko yun kasi meron pa rin akong Elisco. Now, having said that, today ba, meron ba, gumagawa pa rin ba tayo niya? Wala na, di ba?
Wala na yata yun, Mr. President.
Wala na. So, then we do have private manufacturers,
Score.
Armscor, who produce, whose other military and police units in the region buy from the Philippines.
Ang problema yata ng Score, they cannot compete with foreign suppliers kasi sila may VAT, yung foreign supplier walang VAT.
Correct. Mali kasi yung mga kontrata.
Yes.
The point is, eto gumagawa ng trabaho dito, pag foreign suppliers, sinasabi, wala naman sa batas yun, na sila except yung local
Yes.
kailangan magbayad.
Yes, that is
Wala
correct.
naman sa batas yun eh. Okay, so,
We will
eto
try to
nagbabayad
correct that,
ng
Mr. President.
Ito nagbabayad ng income tax, yung isa hindi.
With your help, Mr. President,
Yes,
let's
if you-
correct that
Yes, if you
anomaly.
compute all of that, mas mura yung atin. And I know for a fact that there are many countries in the region, police forces who buy from them. Now, why can't we, and I'm not saying let's do it with Armscor alone. Incidentally, one of their pistols, Rock Island ata yung pangalan, is one of the biggest sellers in the United States. Isn't that correct? One of the biggest. Mura. $400 lang. Pero I think it's number 2 in the US in terms of sales. And they're able to win awards. I think there are those in the AFP or the PNP who compete in exercises abroad who use their their firearms, and they win international competitions. Now, having said that, hindi ba dapat magkaroon tayo ng plano? Maybe the government arsenal could be like a special economic zone.
That's 300 hectares, Mr.
300
President.
hectares, and pwede natin palakihin pa yun. And that you have foreign suppliers who can locate there, create jobs there.
I was informed that there's
Local-
already bill filed in this
Yes.
regard. And I just found out from the SND that of the 300 hectares na nandun, yung where the government arsenal is located, only 10 hectares is being utilized. So there's an extra
Ang laki ng
290
capacity.
hectares. Yes,
And then we can do this and produce for the region.
that is correct, Mr. President.
Pwede pa tayo mag-export. So I wanted to manifest that and put that on the record so that in the future, those in the AFP, especially those who are responsible for and accountable for the government arsenal, develop such a plan because it is part of their mandate. It is part of their mandate under the law. So, so I thank the sponsor for his responses.
We should
And
thank
that
you,
will
Mr.
be-
President, because these
you,
are
Mayor.
policy issues that we are not discussing. And since we are, in fact, a policy-making body, we can do something about this. Because as I mentioned earlier,
Maybe-
300
yeah.
hectares and 290 is
Yeah.
wasteland.
Maybe in the next year's budget, meron na kayong presentation dito na, sige, we need to make the investments in the government arsenal. Ito ang kailangan namin. And I'm sure that Secretary Lorenzana has been also talking to people from Russia whom are interested to develop, to put up sites here in the Philippines, right? May from what I've read somewhere, that may konting usapan tungkol dyan, no? Okay, now, one final issue. I thank my good friend, batchmate as well, Senator Kigo, for discussing the issue of the China Telecom in the AFP. Okay, I had a similar concern. Now, a year ago, before this issue even came out, there is a China loan agreement we have with China for Safe Philippines. Chinatel din na naman. Sa DILG naman. Do you look at it holistically o kanya-kanya lang ngayon?
CCTV yata yun.
Yung CCTV,
And
Safe
you raised
Philippines.
your concern during the budget
Tinanggal ko
deliberation
sa
last
budget.
year.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Tinanggal ko sa budget.
That's 25 billion, I think.
Today, nasa budget ulit. Tinanggal ko sa committee report.
It was vetoed by the President, I
It was
think.
vetoed by the President. So, binalik. Hindi naman nagastos.
Are you
And then
conniving with the
today,
PNP? Hindi naman.
nandyan na naman.
There's no connivance daw with the PNP.
There should be-
Independently.
That's why I'm saying, our AFP and PNP should connive. Because there seems to be a connivance from them. They're entering the PNP, they're entering the AFP. Now, having said that, let me also put on record, there have been security concerns raised with regard to China co-owning the Philippine grid. NGCP.
In fact, I heard that the equipment that arrived in Chinese character na and
Walang
they're
pi-
manned by
That is correct.
Chinese
that is the
personnel.
point I was going to drive at. Right now,
Yes.
yung buong kuryente ng Pilipinas,
Ang
ang
nagmaman.
nagpapatakbo,
Yeah.
the state grid of China. All the equipment is written in Chinese. Hindi na intindihan ng mga tao natin. They can turn it off remotely. Ang gera naman na darating, ganun na eh. Not necessarily missiles. Cyber war. And what is that? Telecommunications. Hindi ho ba? Okay? So, nandyan na, nasa NGCP. And then part of the plan of China Telecom is to use the wires of NGCP for their mid-mile telecommunication. It's all over the papers. Why can't our national defense and security officials look at all of this holistically? We're seeing what is happening in the DILG, in the DND, in the NGCP, in the, what do you call this, in the telecommunication sector. Not to mention there are bills filed in the Senate amending the Public Service Act to allow foreigners 100% ownership. Hindi lang 40 100%. So, hindi ba dapat tinitignan na mabuti yan ng national
They're
security?
doing it already, actually. I
Well,
was
I hope
informed
so.
that it's being done already to make sure na yung mga security concerns that you're raising now
Yes.
are addressed properly.
Thank you very much. I will no longer belabor the point. I am not the expert. They are the experts. So I hope they don't ask me to submit documents to them. I can submit to them reading materials. So I don't know what the value of that is, but maybe they should be the ones submitting documents to us of what actions they're taking, and if assuming they allow China Telecom to be in the AFP, why? What clearances do we have? What regulations do we have? How do we compare to other countries in the region or our allies with regard to those regulations? So, having said that, I thank the sponsor of this, the budget of the DND, who knows the ins and outs of the DND, because marami dyan mga kaklase mo naman eh. So thank you very much for
And
the
thank you for your
opportunity. Thank you.
intervention,
Thank you very
Mr.
much.
President.
Thank you.
Well,
Just a manifestation, Mr.
manifestation of Senator Pangilinan before the interpellation of
Yes,
Senator
with the
Revilla.
permission of Senator Revilla. Just very quickly, Mr. President, I just remembered something when Senator Recto was raising the concern about security and the DILG, China Telco, Huawei arrangement. Mr. President, just for the record, we really have to be concerned about how these companies may have a bearing on our national security. I recall, Mr. President, the controversies and the unrest in Hong Kong. When the Cathay Pacific, it's not even a China company, it's a Hong Kong-based company, when protesters from Cathay Pacific Cathay Pacific employees joined protests. This reverberated up to Beijing. And the information that we have read in the news was that Beijing asked Cathay Pacific to submit the names of employees who participated in the protests, and that they were prevented from entering China. You know, 70% of Cathay Pacific's business, precisely, is with the mainland. And therefore, they became vulnerable. And this is a Hong Kong-based company. We are talking about China Telco, Huawei, which are state-owned or China-based companies. So the question there is, if they do not, or if can they refuse to even reject or refuse to follow certain state policies? And of course, all these in the context of the current 9-line assertion of China and our own sovereignty, and upholding and defending our own sovereignty in the West Philippine Sea. So these have serious, and I'm sure, military and security considerations that we urge the armed forces and the national defense to take heed and to seriously consider. Thank you. For the record, Mr. President.
Senator Bong Revilla.
Thank you, Mr. President. I support the budget of DND and its attached units, but may I provide a few questions regarding the budget of AFP? If the good sponsor, my kababayan, my kapwa kabitenyo, yield to some questions.
Willingly, to my kababayan.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sponsor. I understand, Mr. President, that AFP is able to realize revenues from certain operations in the implementation of its statutory and regulatory functions. Is this correct, Mr. President?
That is correct, Mr. President.
In fact, the use or lease of AFP's equipment, facilities, and real properties is one of the sources of income of AFP. Tama po ba?
Tama po yun.
Mr. President, for 2017, may we know how much revenues have been realized by AFP?
Yung revenue generation. May parte pa nga kayo sa... That is correct. Sa BCDA, meron nga sila nakukuha rito in the amount of 13.7 billion, almost 13.8. No?
For
Government,
2017 po yan.
government arsenal, nasa mga 79 million. So, ang total, ito lahat yan, ano? 28 billion? Ang total na revenue generation. Meron po, baka meron po kayo dyan, pakibasa na lang.
I don't have, that's why I'm asking, Mr. Sponsor.
Kasi ako po, pag nagtatanong, ako lang po yung sagot. Eh. Ito na yung total. From 1995. So, from 1995 hanggang 2019, yung galing sa BCD, remittance. Of course, sa Bureau of Treasury ito, 32.9 billion.
From 1995,
From 1995, noong napasa yung BCDA law, hanggang ngayon, 2019.
2019.
Ang total niya, 32,988,047,031 pesos and 81 centavos. Yun po.
Are these remitted to the general fund or nagagamit po agad ito ng
Ang
AFP?
na-release lang po sa AFP, of the 32.9 billion, 19 billion as of 2019. So meron silang balanse na 13.78 billion pesos. So hindi pa lahat na-release.
From BCDA lang po
From
ba ito?
BCDA lang yun.
Okay. Okay, definitely, Mr. President. These revenues, though meager, will augment the AFP's budget for territorial defense and security. May I know kung saan po ginagamit ng AFP ang mga revenues po na ito?
Sa AFP Modernization po ito ginagamit. Pang equipment.
It's for equipment. Okay. Recently, news came out about the MOA signed by the AFP with Mr. Tel. I was given a copy of the said MOA by the good sponsor. And I heard earlier that the DND Secretary is still reviewing the MOA. Meron lang po kong ilang katanungan dito, Mr. Sponsor, about the MOA. Under the MOA, Mr. Tel will co-locate its microwave relay and base transceiver station for mobile communication and tower facilities and its corresponding tower load within AFP camps and facilities nationwide. For the record, how many sites are we talking about? Meron na po bang listahan ng mga co-location sites?
94 po out of 25,000?
94.
94 out of 25,000.
Kasama po ba itong mga listahan to sa MOA din po?
Naka-spell out po yan.
Naka-spread out. More or less, how much will be the rental for one site? Let us say, if it will be located sa Villamor Air Base, Pasay City, Camp Aguinaldo, Quezon City. Prime areas po ito. I am sure mahal ng rental rates po nito.
Wala pong pesos and centavos involved. Equipment at saka serbisyo lang yung kapalit nito. Yan din po ang tinanong ko sa kanila noong subcommittee hearing. Ba't hindi kayo maningil ng rental? Pero yun nga, equipment saka services. Pero commensurate na rin siguro doon sa space na na-occupy.
So wala po tayong equivalent amount
Wala
doon
po.
sa mga ano na yan.
Masyado sila mabait.
Ayan. So about dito po sa MOA, aside from MOA, will a contract lease be executed for how long po itong term or lease?
Unlike yung sa Globe saka sa Smart na merong definite na period, ito po wala eh. Kasi merong naka-stipulate dyan na anytime and unilaterally pwedeng putulin ng AFP. Pwedeng i-terminate na yung agreement.
Okay, I understand, tama po yung binabanggit nyo sa Globe at sa Smart Telecom. Kailan po ba yung MOA ng AFP with Globe?
Mga 1991 pa raw yan nagsimula, Mr.
1991.
President.
As of October 2019, how much revenues have been realized from this?
Meron ba yun?
Sa Globe po.
Yung Globe. Pareho rin.
Same thing with smart.
Yeah, services and equipment din eh.
Puro
So,
walang value din po.
Walang cash involved.
The reason why I'm asking this, Mr. Sponsor, siguro po dapat mas tingnan po natin dahil yung mga location po na pinaglalagyan nila talaga mga prime properties, no? At malaki siguro ang po pwede pang kitain ng ating gobyerno dito. In fact, I still have so many questions. But,
Ako po, I'm in agreement with you kasi yan din ang tinanong ko sa kanila nung subcommittee hearing. Bakit walang rental fee? Eh gumagamit sila ng space.
Right. Kaya yun lang po ang siguro dapat tingnan po natin para mas malaki pa natin yung income ng
Yeah. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Mr. Sponsor.
The Minority Leader, Senator Ilo.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the gentleman sponsor yield the floor just to a few questions?
Willingly, as always, Mr. President, to the distinguished minority leader.
Mr. President, there are just two issues that I want to bring up. The matter of the rising pension cost for the MUP and the matter of the modernization. All right. I am looking at these technical notes on the 2020 proposed national budget prepared by the Department of Budget and Management. On page 8 of this report, it points out fiscal risks, open quote, fiscal risks and other sources of risks to growth. And let me read it, what the DBM said as one of the fiscal risks. Rising pension costs for military and uniformed personnel. The rapidly rising cost of pension payments and retirement benefits for military and uniformed personnel, or MUP, poses a threat to the national government fiscal position in the medium to long term. End of quote. And as part of the presentation of DBM, which they designate as figure 1 in the report on page 8, it indicates the total pension requirement for MUP at 186.5 billion, out of which 114.7 billion, or 61.5%, is the MUP pension requirement, and 71.8%, or about 38.5%,
PS.
71.8 billion, or 38.5%, would be for salary for PS. First question: Does Mr. Sponsor, does the AFP confirm this? Because this is a DBM presentation.
The data that they have is only for the AFP pension pensioners, Mr. President.
Okay, let's limit to that, AFP pension. How does it look? How much is the PS? How much is the pension?
Yearly PS in 2017, the appropriations for person services 70 billion or 70.9 billion, while the AFP pension is at 34 billion 33 million. For 2019, yung PS umakyat siya sa 114 billion, while yung AFP pension umakyat din siya sa 57 billion. Now,
How
for
much?
2020,
How much, sir?
57.9, 57 billion 935 million 983,000 pesos. Yun ang AFP pension
Okay.
for 2019.
Okay.
compared to the PS of 114 billion 307 million 685,000 pesos. Now, under the proposed 2020 budget, PS appropriation is 117 billion 206 million 93,000 pesos compared to the AFP pension of 58 billion 846 million 62,830 pesos. Yun po yung picture as far
Yes.
as the AFP.
So, the way it sounds, Mr. President, I may be wrong, but it would appear that there is a wide discrepancy between the report of the DBM and what the good gentleman has
Yung sa
mentioned.
DBM po, ano yun, MUP, Military
MUP,
and
I
Uniform
understand,
Personnel.
I understand. But even assuming that this involves everybody and may uniform personnel, medyo malayo po ang figures. No? That's why I was going to ask, is the entry in the budget of 117, let's say for 2020, of 117.2 billion, is just the salary of those in the active service? Or is this the total PS for the AFP, of which 58 billion is retirement?
Yeah, military and civilian personnel ng buong AFP.
Is 117.
117 billion
117
for
billion
2020.
for 2020. And bukod ho doon is a retirement appropriation of 58 billion.
That is correct, Mr. President.
Yes, as I was, I read out the report of the DBM, which appears to
Inconsistent,
indicate,
yeah.
inconsistent, because if 117 to 58 is just 50% or so, whereas here, even including the PNP, it would appear that already that 61.5% of the total PS is on pension. So just looking at it without
Yeah.
the detailed examination, it would appear that these figures that you mentioned, Mr. Sponsor,
Yeah, that is
and the
correct.
report of the DBM does not jibe.
Although we're not comparing apples to apples,
I
but
know.
I see your point, Mr. President, that it is inconsistent
Yes.
with the ratio
That's correct.
because the whole MUP, as you have pointed out, 71.8 billion yung PS, 114 billion na yung pension.
Yes, yung pension.
While sa AFP, mukhang pabaligtad yung yung equation, yung ratio.
That's correct.
Dahil 117 compared to 58 billion. It's probably because there are more police retirees, and that would include BJMP, Bureau of Fire, even Coast Guard.
Well,
Ang AFP is entirely yung different because AFP lang yung pinag-uusapan dito. But
Yeah, I
I
know.
agree with you that there's a big discrepancy in the ratio. And we have to sort this out, Mr.
Yes.
President.
Yes, we have to sort this out because this is a fiscal risk, as pointed out by the Department of Budget and Management. Because in your presentation, sir, it would appear that the crossing,
Yes.
the crossing between the pension and the regular pay.
The entire MUP.
The entire MUP simply requires an explanation.
They will not intersect.
They will not intersect
Yes.
yet. So anyway, maybe, DBM is no longer around, but maybe the Department of Finance people who will be back this afternoon can be asked to clarify this. But having said that, Mr. President, during the committee hearing of the budget of the DND, Secretary Lorenzana committed that they are going to submit a proposed bill or plan or roadmap to put up a self-sustaining pension fund. May we know, may we have an update of this, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Sponsor?
They're still finalizing it, and they will submit to us as soon as they have finalized their pension plan, because it entails also the participation or the input coming from the DOF. Because as we have discussed earlier, there are a lot of alternatives or options, like sale of assets to form the seed money for the pension plan.
In fact, if you recall, Mr. Sponsor, yesterday I pointed out the substantial recovery if we privatize the gaming industry. And
That's correct.
maybe we can use that also to fund past service liabilities of our soldiers. There's nothing wrong with that. It is a policy issue as to whether we should continue to operate casinos. And in our view, we should not. And we can use the privatization of the gaming industry to fund the past service liabilities in the AFP. But
And as you
anyway,
pointed out, it doesn't take legislation to accomplish that.
Yes.
Because it's already incorporated in the GCG law that you passed,
that's correct, sir.
na it only takes an EO from the
Yes.
executive department to accomplish that.
That's correct, sir. So it's a doable activity. Now, which brings me to another point. The AFP modernization program. Again, from this report, the AFP modernization program is continuously funded under Republic Act 10349.
49,
Which,
yes.
which is the basis conversion.
Revised AFP Modernization Act.
Yes. Now, the law extends the modernization program for another 15 years in order that the enhancing, we can continue enhancing the capabilities of the AFP. Did I hear, can the gentleman honor or accommodate me by repeating what was mentioned earlier as to the amount of money that's already been allocated for the modernization plan?
Under the revised AFP Modernization Program, yung 10349, ang na-release na po, 133,862,417,909 pesos. Yung,
Pwede ba round off mo na lang yun? Ang
oh,
haba-haba.
133 o 134 billion.
134
Okay.
billion. Okay.
Doon sa 7898, yung original na AFP Modernization Program, 63.3 or sabihin natin 63.4 kasi 63.38. So, ang total, 197.2 billion pesos.
Since what year, sir?
Yung since 7898, 1995. 2000, no, 2002. 2002 yung funding nagsimula.
Sorry.
2002 nagsimula yung funding.
2002. And the 134 billion from what, for what period?
Simula nung 2014, ano? Yung revised, passed in 2014.
2014,
Yung revised.
yung revised.
Yung original, yung AFP Modernization Program or Act, yung 7898, 2002.
Because let me read to you the statement of the DBM in this booklet. It says, for 2020, some 25 billion pesos is allotted to the program,
Yeah, nandito yun.
bringing the total appropriated budget since 2014 to 154.7 billion. Tama ho ba ito?
That is correct, Mr. President.
So this is a correct figure since since 2014 to date, 154.7 billion.
Ang unreleased. 188. Ang fund releases, Mr. President, since 2002, a total of 188 billion, 80 million, or 188 billion. Yun ang since 2002 under the General Appropriations Act. Ang unreleased, naiwan pa mga 28.5 o 28.6 billion pesos.
Sa dami pong figure na nasasabi dito I am reminded of the saying, confuse the enemy. Not that we are enemies, but talagang mahirap po intindihin.
That is not the intention, Mr. President.
I hope that's not the intention. In any case, having said that, Mr. President, I do recall that several years back, there was talk of transferring the AFP Camp Aguinaldo ba yan? Is it
Camp Aguinaldo.
Camp Aguinaldo from its present site to somewhere else and use the present site to generate funds for the AFP, particularly on the
To Port
modernization.
May-Saysay,
I don't recall
Yeah.
anymore. But can we spread on the record what was the original plan and what happened to the original plan? Is it going to be pursued?
that was the plan, only to find out that Camp Aguinaldo, once it is vacated as a military facility, would revert back to the Ortigas family. So inabandon yung plan. But I
Well,
was
okay,
told,
just stop there, sir,
Yes.
if I may. You know, that was a similar setup with the provincial capital of Rizal. It was, if you know, the present provincial capital, former
Pasig, in
provincial capital grounds of Rizal, is now a mall owned and operated by the Ortigas. I think, I don't know what it's called now. Anyway, the provincial capital of Rizal, as we know now, transferred to Antipolo. Okay.
yes, that is correct,
Now,
Mr. President.
It was, but Ortigas did not get their land free. Ortigas had to fund the transfer, including the
Real estate.
the building in Antipolo, and some sums of money in addition. What I am pointing out, Mr. President, is the fact that there is that reversion provision in the deed of donation is not a hindrance to
I can
being
read your mind,
able-
Mr. President. I can read your mind.
yeah, to being able to generate funds out of a location which is not really critical to the AFP. In other words, they can go to, not for anything, but if we see that is an opportunity for us to gather, to have a fund for the modernization.
Begging the indulgence of the gentleman on the floor, I just received a request from the members of the Commission on Appointments who are on the other side of the hall. If they can borrow the two generals, if they're not answering your questions.
I have no problems with that, Mr. President. I believe.
So can we send Senator Lacson to dismiss the two generals to attend their CA hearings?
They just go on leave like the president taking vacation leave.
Yeah, if they're not answering your questions, if it's the Secretary de Lorenzana,
Yes,
What do you think?
General Clement and General Cusi may be excused, Mr.
Yes.
President.
All right,
But they have to
so-
come back here after their confirmation.
oh yes, yes.
Sige, no.
You can attend the meeting.
Well, congratulations
ongoing.
in advance,
Mag-section
General,
20 sana
for
ako,
your
pero nandito ako,
confirmation.
so...
The congressmen are waiting on the other side of the hall, so you can start with their hearings. And it's not prevented. They are borrowing also Senator Tolentino to attend. Anyway, he's done with this
No, ano rin siya,
interpellation.
member ng CA.
So,
Okay, so we may continue, please.
going back to my proposition, the fact that there is a condition in the deed of donation, which is the reversion to the Ortigas family, should not be a hindrance because the AFP can stay there forever and the Ortigas family will not be able to do anything. That is a very valuable property which the Ortigas would be willing to pay in the form of whatever amount and, that they will donate to the government for the AFP to free that space and use the funds now that we generate out of this for the AFP modernization.
Oh, okay, so good. Yes, that is correct, Mr. President. Very good suggestion. But for your point of information, only 25 hectares out of the 177 hectares, yun ang titled sa Ortigas.
What about the rest? Where
The
is-
rest,
who's the-
parang Laperal family or meron pang ibang kakausapin. Yung eksaktong lugar where the General Headquarters building is located, yun ang Ortigas.
Okay.
That's 25 hectares.
Okay.
But the total land area is 177.
Yes.
But having said that, pareho rin naman yung formula that you're suggesting. I would like to believe that the other owner or owners of the entire complex would be very willing because 177 hectares in that area would, cost, hindi na natin mabilang, Mr.
Hindi na
President.
natin, that's correct. And hindi na rin natin mabilang kung magkano ang funds na ma-generate natin. If we are just serious about
The pension plan.
about that plan, about the AFP modernization plan, I do not see any disadvantage to the AFP if they transfer to another location. Or is there one that I do not see? Meron bang
They
meron
will
bang-
study the matter and make the proper proposal. Ang gusto lang, tumabi sa atin sa BGC. Mas mapamahal pa.
Mas mapamahal pa po yan. Levity aside, I think this is a serious matter which we can resort to help the AFP generate the much needed funds for its modernization instead of year in and year out,
Yes.
coming before Congress, begging for funds to modernize our armed forces. Here is an asset, dead asset, if I may assert, which can be used with serious study to generate funds for the AFP. Para po hindi na tayo maghanap dito at year in and year out. The AFP would come to us and ask for funds. I don't even know how much it generates, but it's mind-boggling that we could not even
Trillions, yeah.
billions of
Trillions, I
pesos.
would assume.
So,
Your Honors.
may I ask first? May I ask through the good sponsor, the AFP to activate or to form a task force to study this proposition?
In fact,
Pwede ba
right after this budget hearing, Mr. President, they will start posing their pencils
Yes.
and study and make the proper recommendation.
Yes.
They're more than willing, and thank you for the idea, for the suggestion, because they'll be more than willing to adopt the suggestion made by the distinguished gentleman.
Your Honors,
Yes.
you might as well complete the study in the contention of the Quezon City government about this, because I distinctly remember in 1989, when I was Vice Mayor of Quezon City, my mayor then, Jun Simon, wanted to remove the Camp Aguinaldo because of the coup d'etat of Gringo and company. So he wanted them out of Quezon City. But then they said that it will revert back to the Ortigases, so we abandoned the idea. So just to make sure that you contend with the Quezon City government also, no? And not only the national government as
Yes.
far as that study is concerned.
So, I have been in the bureaucracy for quite a while, and unless you impose deadlines, taon-taon po, puro ng understudy. I hope it is not too much to ask,
The task force.
Mr. Sponsor, if we can ask the DND to give us a timeline for both the first request that I made, which is the matter of the roadmap for the self-sustaining pension fund, and a possible source of revenue for the AFP modernization program. Because here, again, just on a smaller scale, let me relate to you, Mr. Sponsor. Years ago, in Iloilo, we transferred the airport from where it was to move it to where it is today. And it freed 52 hectares of land right in the city. We sold that land to Mega World, through bidding, and the amount generated was just about enough if you put on net present value the loan that we secured from Japan to put up the airport and the terminal of about, I think, 6 billion pesos. So it is a process where you use the asset to generate funds for a valid purpose. So I strongly feel that this is an asset. This is something that we can help AFP modernize. And there is an asset there that is available. It's a question of pushing pencils, devoting time, coming up with a plan, and there are experts all over the bureaucracy, particularly in the asset privatization trust, if it's still existing, in the Department of Finance. They have an asset privatization unit there, which are experts in the privatization of government assets. And here, this is a perfect opportunity. And so we do hope that we do not have to wait until the next budget round in order that we can have some, we can move forward on this. This is something that I would strongly submit can benefit the armed forces of the Philippines.
Thank you. As a matter of fact, Mr. President, except for Undersecretary Carolina, most if not all of these guys are my underclassmen, so I'm ordering them to comply with your requirement. Once they go back to camp, they should start pushing pencils and provide a timeline. No? Kasi once you create a task force, I remember President Ramos at the time, if you don't want to finish the work, you create a task force.
Yes.
But in this particular situation, they will create a task force to finish the job.
Yeah. Well, in
And,
fact,
kailan daw?
ca-
When can you submit to us, to Congress?
just a rough outline.
Rough lang. Yung timeline. When can you finish the study and the proper recommendation? Within this month. November na tayo, ha?
Kaya nyo, ha?
November 30, they will submit to us a copy of their,
Proposed
of their
action
study
plan.
proposal.
Because
the plan.
as you mentioned, President Ramos, his favorite marginal note is in the memo you give to him,
CSW.
is CSW,
Complete staff work.
complete staff work. So yan
They will
po.
do that. They will do
Yes.
that, Mr. President.
So thank you, Mr. President, and we do hope to receive this action plan on the two documents that we're asking for, which will help AFP tremendously. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. I received a note here, Mr. President. Senator Gordon would like to interpolate. He is requesting to suspend and ask his questions after the CA meeting.
I was also instructed by his staff. I was about to mention
Notice,
that.
Mr. President, that Senator Lacson has a very sad face when he...
Worried face, Mr. President.
Well, I'd like to make an appeal to the sponsor because you know Senator Gordon feels very strongly about defense,
Okay.
internal and external defense issues. And yes, they've made consistent follow-up with me if it's possible that
So,
we could suspend. What we could do, Mr. President, we have Senator Marcos would also like to manifest, but she's right in the CA hearing now. She just wants to manifest, and then we can have Senator Gordon. So we can suspend now, have the CA, and they'll
right
immediately.
after
would
the
be-
CA meeting,
They
because
will-
we want,
Yes,
we
Mr.
don't
President.
want to delay also the deliberation of the budgets of DA,
Absolutely, sir.
DPWH, and there are other agencies.
So what we'll do is, right after the CA hearing, we will resume consideration of the Department
But
of
it's
National
almost 12
Defense.
noon. So we will have to suspend and come back
Yes,
at 2
Mr.
p.m.
President. That is correct, Mr. President. And what will happen is, we'll give it some time. We'll ask the staff and Senator Gordon that we will wait for him at 2 p.m. If they are not here by that time, we have to move on.
Anyway, Mr. President, the chairman of the Commission on Appointments is also needed for the plenary
Yes, sir.
deliberation
Yes, sir.
or confirmation.
That's
All right,
correct.
the majority leader.
So, Mr.
and,
President,
Your Honors, we will be, all right, we will be suspending as you
Yes,
proposed.
Mr. President.
And then
Resume at 2
resume
p.m.
the Department of the National Defense budget after the, at 2 o'clock.
Yes,
But
Mr. President.
may we perhaps remind our colleagues ang usapan natin,
Yes,
pag
Mr.
wala ka
President.
dito, tapos na yung departamento, wala na. So perhaps this is the only lenient day that we can do.
Yes,
Just
Mr. President.
because andyan pa yung defense, hindi pa tapos, pwede mag-resume ng 2 o'clock.
Yes,
But
Mr.
perhaps after this, let us strictly follow our agreement.
Yes, Mr.
So
President,
that,
I agree.
please
I agree.
remind our colleagues. So tama yung sabi nyo, those who would want to interpolate the budget of the Department of National Defense should be here at 2 o'clock. If
Yes,
they're
Mr.
not here
President.
at 2 o'clock and we're finished with that, we finish the budget
Yes, Mr.
with
President.
it's deemed submitted.
Because, Mr. President, I'd like to remind our colleagues that we must follow schedules.
Yes.
We are also here, you and I, Mr. President, together with Senator Lacson, Senator Drilon, we are here doing 12-hour shifts. And we're also busy. We also want to attend meetings outside, but we can't. We're doing our job here. So if they want to interpolate, with all due respect to our colleagues, pasok po sila. They should come.
Yes.
Should not be our fault, Mr. President, if they are not around. Yan ang apela po natin sa mga kasamahan natin. I hope the staff that are listening here now, please take note of that. Please tell your principals that we have a standing, not order, but we have a standing
It was an
request
agreement
or an
and a rule-
agreement,
yes.
a gentleman's agreement last week that those who are present may be able to ask questions, those who are absent, sorry na lang po. Because lahat po tayo
Sorry na
napapagod.
lang when we're done with the
Budget
of the
and
committee.
deemed submitted
of
and
the
approved.
department, yes.
That's correct, Mr. President.
All right. Unless it's an emergency.
Yes, unless it's an emergency po, then we can make, of course,
Alright.
we can always listen to the wishes of the body. And
All right. Thank you, sir.
thank you, sir.
So-
So with that, we move to suspend the budget of the DND.
End the session.
End the session till 2 p.m. for a lunch, commission appointments hearing and lunch break.
All right. Any objection? Hearing none. Session is suspended until 2 o'clock this afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ayun na.